Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage. We'll take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're going to be talking about Nintendo as the big one of an overview of the company. Now this is going to be more of a deep dive. We're going to be digging into the history itself of Nintendo a little bit. We're then going to talk about the games. We're then going to talk about the products that are out there. We're then going to talk about the services and their network. We're going to go over kind of pretty much a deep dive of their financials as how they're doing as a company, like with what we've already done with PlayStation and also Xbox. If you've missed those, I'll try to remember to actually link those down below, but you can also find those in my States of Gaming playlist at Gaming Garbage 22. Now, I am still kind of sick, under the weather, so there's going to be some coughing and some other stuff. Like right there. But anyway, we're going to get through this. So roughly expect to strap in for about an hour. We're also going to go over a conclusion after everything, and then we're also going to take time to go over the transition from Switch 1 to Switch 2, which is really why I wanted to do Nintendo last, because I knew that we were going to get some information on the Switch 2, and it's been quite the ride the last month and a half. And so, yeah, I've waited a little bit longer just to make sure we can get everything, to know everything that we can. And now we actually pretty much know everything. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. But hey, let's go ahead and get into this. So Nintendo got into the gaming scene in '84. So of course they were building it before that, but that was with the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And then it released to the rest of the world in '85, which is when my parents ended up grabbing one basically in the late '80s. And yeah, which is kind of crazy. They got one of the bundles that's like $1,000 now, or maybe even more than that, because it still has all of the original everything else. It's pretty insane. But anyway, yeah, the NES sold for basically $150, which was pretty expensive. That'd be like an equivalent of $450 today. And but it was something that families could afford, at that time. And by the end of the '80s. And into the '90s. So the end of the '80s, we did see that inflation. We were thinking we were going to have another quick recession, which we had pretty much two quickly back to back in the '80s. I've talked about that before, but we ended up having a pretty good '90s for the most part. We had '94, partly into '95, and then the rest of the decade in the '90s was amazing. It was pretty incredible, and I remember a little bit of that. But yeah, the idea of Nintendo wasn't always high-end, right? It didn't really stay that way. The focus was, again, affordability and for the family to be able to play and enjoy video games. And kind of that bonding or connection. Now, it's certainly gone away from that to a degree, and there's different factors for that. But the only other competition really was kind of Atari. They're still around. There was, Magnavox also had something as well that was out. And there were a few other consoles or systems. But again, none of them are really what I would call relevant today. Nintendo is really the only one since it's been started in the '80s. There were also computers back then, but again, these were insanely expensive. So we're talking back then, thousands of dollars. So expensive today is like $1,500, $2,000, maybe $3,000. I mean, that's like today's money. Actually, $2,000-$3,000 in today's money, but we're talking back then, $2,000-$3,000 in the '80s. Dang, is that expensive? That is crazy. Even Atari got into the PC market a little bit to try to compete in that space. But by this time, Atari wasn't doing very good. Again, we were having that gaming crash in the early '80s. And they were focusing more on computers at the time. And so, yeah, they actually sold their arcade sector and also their gaming division to other companies. They were basically getting out. Again, it wasn't really working for them. There were too many people in the space. There was a bunch of what we would call shovelware today. And everything, of course, cost money at that point, too. And so, console gaming was falling out of favor, arcade gaming. So, yeah, they ultimately just sold stuff. And that was the end of that. And there wasn't really a giant in gaming for the family except for the NES. So this really made the NES successful. And I really think, in a way, gaming would have died because Nintendo was the only one that actually tried it. Excuse me. But it is kind of amazing that, with how empty the space was back then, Nintendo had an easy way to actually establish. All they had to do was just not mess it up. They weren't really competing against anybody else. They just had to actually present a good console that was affordable and then continue to support it, which they did. And a lot of us actually know their old IPs all the way even to today. So they're still making games for IPs they made 40 years ago, which is pretty incredible. That's better than anyone else we can say. So ultimately, through this, Nintendo became a name brand as the #1 console. It was the thing to beat. They had the Super NES after that, which I loved playing on. They also had the N64 and the GameCube. The GameCube was probably my favorite. There was also the Wii, which was extremely innovative and actually sold the most consoles out of any generation. Then we had the Wii U, which was like the worst selling generation. But the Wii U really like paved the way for handhelds today. So we had this big massive brick handheld gamepad kind of thing that they called it. But this ultimately was kind of too early. And a lot of times it always seems to be. But this was actually pretty incredible from a consumer standpoint, is that you could take your gaming with you wherever you went. And you got to remember, too, like before the Wii U, this was really before like cell phones were super big, or like smartphones were super big. Like they were popular, but again, they were also really expensive, and we were paying for like text messaging like by the letter. So we created a whole new language basically of acronyms to actually text and save money that way. And then we had the Switch, which again was extremely successful. We're looking at basically 152 million consoles sold, and it's led to the Switch 2. So yeah, interestingly enough, every next generation from the NES to the GameCube actually sold less units every generation. So they were starting to lose some of their buying power, some of their influence and effect on the market. We also had PlayStation, we also had Xbox, and these were kind of becoming like bigger powerhouses, especially with the PlayStation 2 and especially with the Xbox 360. So again, these were massive consoles. A lot of players flocked to these, and these really became the primary console. And so yeah, Nintendo was kind of losing out on selling console units. And so they had to come up with something different. And yeah, this is basically from 85 to 2005, they were actually losing market share, which is kind of crazy to think about, because we have that 20-year period where they were still selling consoles, they were still selling stuff, but like they really had to change things up and bring something new to the table that no one else was. They had to innovate. And that's how we got the Wii. And then again, that was the best-selling console they ever had. Now, the Switch actually sold the most by 50, or excuse me. The Switch sold quite a bit, but it wasn't as many as what the Wii sold. The Wii sold around 210 million units, I believe. It was over 200 million. And that was, that was just incredible. And yeah, the Wii sold a ton. But the Switch 2 still did a really good job. We just got that Wii U in the middle there, which did not sell as well. So yeah, the Wii U just wasn't presented well. I don't feel like it was supported well. It barely sold anything. It's actually one of the worst selling consoles ever. The Wii U is. It's pretty it's pretty freaking horrible, honestly. It's pretty bad. But yeah, a lot of the factors of why the Switch actually sold really well. The Switch 1 was that it was, again, innovating off of the Wii U in a much better way for players. They also supported it a lot better, they marketed it a lot better, and they provided features that players were actually interested in. And there was a shift going away from family focus more toward like kind of the college age gamer, or like the high school gamer. So there were some more things and some more features that were different from that than what they kind of normally had been. And in my opinion, this is when the shift really started to happen, was with the Switch. But also it was $300 compared to other consoles being $500. Big price difference. We still had that portability in the handheld. And again, the handheld market was really starting to become in demand. And as it was coming into its own and creating its own market, there were more and more companies that are seeing, hey, there's actually money there. We can capture some of that. And so now there's some pretty vicious competition in the space. And now we just had the Xbox handheld leaked by Asus. So yeah, we'll have to see exactly what that's all about. Also, their first party were still exclusives for the Switch. So again, it sold really, really well. And so did their games. We'll get into that in just a second. Also, all of their games stayed at $60 when we saw prices starting in 22 normalized to 70. And they stayed to $60 all the way through 2024. So they roughly had 2.5, 3 years where they stayed $10 cheaper than everybody else. So from an affordability standpoint, it was really strong. And what they offered was also really, really strong. But yeah, these factors will actually be important as we continue to go through the podcast. So again, the fact that it was cheaper, the fact that it was a handheld, a new market, the fact too that it was first party exclusives and that they were $60 instead of $70. And now these dynamics are starting to change. And I think some of you are going to find my conclusion interesting, but let's keep going. So the games themselves. First party stays exclusives and they sell well. We all know that. So this is as of December 2024. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was 67,000 units. Animal Crossing New Horizons was 47 million. Super Smash Ultimate was 36 million. Breath of the Wild was 32 million. Super Mario Odyssey was 29 million. Pokemon Sword and Shield was 26. Pokemon Scarlet Violet was also 26. Tears of the Kingdom was 21 million. Super Mario Party was 21 million. We also had Super Mario Bros. U, 18 million. And yeah, this was because the Switch 1 games were $60, which was great. I mean, it was affordable. But now we're looking at the Switch 2 games being $70 all the way up to $90. Dang, like that's getting expensive, man. And then when they're not graphically comparable, in my opinion, to what we're seeing on the other consoles or what we're seeing on other handhelds, that's not really good. And then, yeah, physical copies, it will basically be like a $10 upcharge, which sucks. And that's how we're getting the $90 games. So the affordability is really starting to become a problem to a degree because, again, we have these expensive games. And we'll get into the products and the accessories as well. But all of these numbers that I listed off are actually on the Switch 1. And yeah, these numbers are huge. So again, the affordability of the console, the affordability of the games, and then the games have always remained exclusive. And they don't really go down in price either. And it really doesn't seem to matter. I mean, you buy a console for their exclusives. That's always how it's been. And Nintendo has never budged from that. All right, let's talk about the products. So they've always kind of seemed expensive, the accessories, but they've always also had a cheaper console. So the Switch 1 was, again, $300. This was a big focus on the handheld market as well. They also had an OLED model for $350. So an extra $50 really doesn't seem like that much. It was basically a little less than one of the games you could buy for. Taking a look at the Switch 2, we know it's going to be $450. We can also expect an OLED model in the future for like $500, $550. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be the case anymore because we also have to talk about tariffs. So we'll get into that at the end of the products here. We also have Joy-Con controllers. They went from $80 to now $95. The current Joy-Con 2s also will not have Hall effects, but they'll be resistant. They'll have like the silicone sleeve around the rim. That will help the joystick not shift over as hard. There will be some resistance there, which after repairing some controllers, yeah, that probably will actually be helpful a little bit. It's actually kind of ingenious, but still, I would buy a second pair, even though it's $95. I don't think the price is going to stay that way forever during this generation. They're also adding a camera for the Switch 2, which really looks pretty garbage. This is at 1080p. But like the frame rate and how it's rendered on the console while it's playing something just looks horrendous. I mean, we're talking like 15 frames or less. It looks really, really bad. And this is still $55, the camera is. The Switch 1 screens can also be used with the Switch 2 console. So you can use that as like a second player almost, but it's like a $300 controller. Ho, ho. Like that is getting pretty dang expensive if you think about it. Because yeah, you got to pair the screen to the Switch 2, so then you can have two screens running off of one console, but unfortunately you can't have any more than that. There's also expansion cards. These, unfortunately, too, have gone up in price and also need to be express cards because, again, they need to have higher data transfer rates, and that's because there's just more data to actually process. So we're going from assets that were 1080p to now 4K, so that's 4 times the resolution data. We're also looking at frame rate, which, again, that's more hardware than anything else, but it still has to be able to, computate all of that. And then we're also looking at ray tracing. So there's ray tracing now on top of all of this, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity to be computed and actually showed on the screen. So your transfer rate for your game data has to be really high actually to actually do this, because you're going multiple times higher to actually compute this stuff. And that data transfer rate's got to be pretty high. Otherwise, you just can't run it on your TV. And this is why now we have to use SSDs, solid state drives, in order to, for our PlayStation and for our Xbox and also for PCs. Like, it's just a new standard now because of all of the graphical improvements that we have. And yeah, this is kind of crazy. And these express cards, I'd say too, are going pretty quickly. So they're actually hard to get a hold of. And again, not everybody sells these yet, but there's a 256 gig, there's a 512 gig, and a 1 terabyte option. And again, these are all selling very quickly, but make sure that the description says that they do work with the Switch 2. Again, not all of them do. Make sure they're an express card. Again, not all of them are. And then make sure you're actually buying the storage option that you want, which at this point, yeah, I would just go with a 1 terabyte, because if you're wanting to play any of the third-party games, I am sure they're going to be pretty huge. And that 256 gigs internally for the Switch 2 is going to fill up pretty quickly, so you're going to want an express card anyway. So yeah, this will be pretty interesting to actually see what happens, because we're seeing a price increase across the board for everything, and this is why now we need to talk about tariffs, which again, I know is not a happy camper subject for everybody. It is frustrating. Yes, it is the company's problem. Yes, but it is also the consumer's problem if they still choose to go out and buy the stuff anyway when it's priced high. So right now, Nintendo has confirmed that at launch, June 5th for the Switch 2, the tariffs will not affect the price at launch. So presumably the price will actually go up over time. And so this means that the price, with the current tariffs as they are right now out of Vietnam, we're going from $450 to like $650. And that is just for Nintendo to actually get the product into the United States. So that's incredibly expensive. So if that's the case, it's like, well, they still need to actually sell it for more than that so that they can still actually make a profit, because I'm sure the profit margin is basically gone at that point. It would completely, as we'll see in the financials, it completely wipe out the profit margin that they have as a company. Because again, all they really deal with and deal in is just gaming. So if they can't sell their gaming, if the consumers feel priced out, that's going to be a major problem. This is also affecting all of the accessories. So we did have the initial prices, and now the prices are all anywhere from, $5 to basically $10 more than what they were originally priced at. And so that's just more money too. And then we have variable game pricing, where now games can basically be at a floor of $70, but they can also be $80 too, because according to Bowser, the U.S. president of Nintendo, expressing that, hey, we're taking a look basically at how popular a game is, how many hours you can play, whether it's multiplayer or not, and that's all deciding in a factor if we're going to actually sell it at 80 or not. Which is kind of disgusting, because it also means that 80 doesn't have to be the ceiling. So ultimately, this actually gets pretty complicated and frustrating, because it's not just necessarily stable pricing anymore, partly because of Nintendo's business model and also partly because of the tariffs on top of that. So again, do I think they're going to sell, you know, 80 or like 67 million copies of Mario Kart World? No, I don't actually. Or like 47 million copies of Animal Crossing? We don't even have an Animal Crossing game. We'll take a look at that in a second. Super Smash Ultimate, 36 million on the Switch One. Again, we don't have an Ultimate game. Breath of the Wild, 32 million. Again, I don't think they're really going to sell that many copies. We also don't have a new Legend of Zelda game. And we have a new Hyrule Warriors game. And let's actually take a look at some of these now that we're here. So Super Mario World, you've been enjoying that picture a ton, but we're also going to have Donkey Kong Bonanza. We'll let this play a little bit as we chat about it. And this is going to be kind of like a semi-open world experience. I don't think it'll kind of be like a platformer. We're of course going to have some like 3D open world environments to a degree, but we're also going to have some side-scrolling action as well. And yeah, this even too is going to be $70, and we're not even getting it at launch. Pretty close. But yeah, the only one we're actually getting at launch is this guy. This is it. Everything else is coming after that. It's kind of ridiculous. We're also getting Metroid Prime, which we don't have a release date for that. Also getting Kirby Air Riders. And then here is the other Hyrule Warrior game. And then there's also some third-party stuff as well, like Dust Bloods and Hades, Split Fiction, Borderlands 4, Cyberpunk, and then I will let this actually scroll too so you can take a look at the list as we continue to chat. But there are a lot of games coming, just not a lot of first party in my opinion. And then there's also some first party games that are missing. And then we still don't even have a release date for Pokemon Legends, ZA. We also don't have a release date for Pokemon Champions. And yeah, again, I think this is another issue because we do have a lineup, but I feel like the Switch 2 is a lot more focused and set up toward all of the third-party stuff that they're probably hoping to make some money off of, which would roughly be 30% off of every single sale. This is why I think we have DLSS upscaler to actually improve the frame rate of what you're playing on or with what you're playing. I also think, too, this is why we have ray tracing, so that it can actually run fairly close versions to PlayStation 5 and Series X games. And then also why we're looking at, 4K resolution, which is a pretty big jump. Again, that's 4 times the resolution. And so now because of this, we also need these express cards to actually have the bandwidth to actually run and process that information and send it to the console from the hard drive to actually put it up on the screen. So yeah, all of this is getting pretty fancy, pretty technical, but again, it's also getting pretty expensive as well. Now, what the games are going to cost for all of these that you're seeing on the screen, we don't exactly know yet. Again, that's going to be up to the third-party publisher. I'm sure some of these are going to be $50, some are going to be $60, and I'm sure some are also going to be $70. But think about that. It's like you're buying a worse version of the game for a handheld that is locked to that handheld. Okay, it's not like the Steam Deck where you can play between your PC or your handheld or something else. It's now just completely locked to the Switch 2. Or like with Xbox, being able to play across multiple platforms, including even your TV, which is kind of crazy. Like you don't even need a console anymore to actually run this stuff. They can just stream it to you to a degree. Of course, it's not every single game, but they're working on actually doing that. But yeah, this is getting kind of crazy. Things are getting kind of convoluted. And yeah, ultimately, I feel like the Switch 2 is a certain change in their business model. But yeah, we'll get more into that as well. Let's talk about services. So we're looking at Nintendo Online and also Expansion Pass. So these are 2 different services. Both of these allow you to actually play online. Both provide discounts. Both, let's see, both actually provide NES and Super NES and also cloud saves. The expansion pass is basically the backwards compatibility list. Also includes game chat. Actually, I think game chat is for Nintendo Online, not expansion pass. I believe I wrote that down incorrectly. But yeah, the backwards compatibility list so far is Sega Genesis, N64, Game Boy, Game Boy Advanced, and GameCube. So you can actually get a list of select titles, which in my opinion is not very many. And I don't know if they're also going to continue to expand those. So far, they've just kind of been expanding the types of generations that they're having be a part of the backwards compatibility list. So they're more kind of broadening the list by adding some games for that specific system, like the GameCube. They're adding that this time. There's also going to be some DLCs for the games as well, and they're also going to be adding some of the Switch 2 editions for free to Expansion Pass. Nintendo Online is $20 a year, honestly pretty cheap, pretty affordable, or $35 a year for a family. There's also Expansion Pass, which is $50 a year for the individual and $80 per year for the family. So, but yeah, you do have to have this to actually have game chat. So they're going to make it free, I think, for the first year. And then after that, it's going to tell you, hey, when you hit that C button to chat, it'll tell you that you're going to need Nintendo Online, that you'll actually need to pay for that feature. And paywalling, I think, is just ridiculous for a feature like that. It's already free everywhere else, but they think they can actually get you to pay for it, which shows that they're worried about their Nintendo Online subscription service, that they're not really growing in members, that they're trying to actually get more and see more growth there. And we're going to see when we look at the financials that stuff is actually kind of slowing down too for them, which is maybe why they're getting a little worried. But they're always been a company that works ahead, so they don't wait for the problem to actually show up. They try to be really proactive, and they benefit a lot from that as a company. Let's talk about their network. It's pretty big. So let's talk about their network. Their network is actually pretty big. According to Nintendo themselves, their network is 129 million users. Out of that, September 2024 showed that there were 34 million paying for Nintendo Online. Also from Nintendo, they said that 14% of the Switch 1s weren't even turned on last year in 2024. So they're losing some of their player base, okay? They're starting to become irrelevant. People aren't necessarily buying anything new. It's just they're playing on something else, which that's got to be kind of concerning. So I think this partly, too, is also why they're trying to improve things, right? Because they can't make games fast enough to keep giving new things to actually put out on the Switch 1. And while some of those are selling, they're not selling 50 million copies or anything, but they're still selling pretty good, and that is bringing money into the company. But they are seeing a change in behavior for their consumer base. Because, 14% didn't even turn it on once. That's kind of insane. It also shows that for a lot of the player base on Nintendo Switch 1, that it's not actually really the primary console. There's someone else, okay? It's either PC as a platform, some other handheld, PlayStation 5, Xbox. That is more primary than the actual Switch 1, which is kind of crazy. Oh, yeah, I also wanted to pull up the page, the page with the age on it. Oh, yeah, let's mention this, too. So their backwards compatibility list from Switch 1 to Switch 2, almost all of their games, first-party games, are actually going to run just fine. Just a few because of, certain kits or whatever isn't going to run. And then they're currently testing all of their partner third-party games, which I guess there's 15,000 of them. But so far, roughly around 21-22% are going to run with no issues. And there's been a lot of games that have actually been started. And this list has not been updated for actually some time. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. So this I actually wanted to talk about because as you can see, can I double click on that? Though that's as big as it's going to get. As you can see, the Switch player base is actually older than we would expect. So again, basically from here over are kids. From this line right here. That should be 18, 19, 20 should be right there. So yeah, from 18 over, it's actually pretty small compared to everything else because this is like 42, 43, 44, 45. 45 is actually in line with the kids. And so this bracket is basically from 19-year-olds all the way over to 43, which is pretty nuts. So it's a wide range of adults, but there's a heck of a lot more older folks that are over 30 that are actually playing. And that actually surprised me. Yeah, the block from 30 to 42 is actually pretty high, and then it tapers off a lot after that. But yeah, they're not really growing, in my opinion, with the younger generations. They're playing somewhere else. And I think more or less they're actually attached to the game, which is why Switch is basically wanting to bring back, or Nintendo is wanting to bring back Fortnite. Because again, there's a ton of kids that actually play that. And again, those kids are in here somewhere to a degree, right? So there's still a massive spike around, 20 to 25 years old. That's some of the highest in this age demographic. But again, yeah, 30 to 42, that 12-year time period is just surprising how many people are actually playing that. So when we're hearing people talking about Nintendo, when we're hearing people that are talking about games and the Switch 2 and pre-ordering and stuff, they're probably somewhere between 30 and 40 years old, which is kind of surprising. And those are the fans. That's what they're surprised about. The kids, they don't really care what they're playing on. They're just focused on, can I get Minecraft? Can I get Roblox? Can I get Rocket League? Can I get Fortnite? Can I get Counter-Strike Go? Can I play COD? Like, that's what they're focused on. They're focused on those types of games, and those are the games that they play. So, but yeah, seeing this actual demographic is very interesting. I wish we had user data like this for PlayStation and also for Xbox, and even too for Steam. I think it'd be very interesting to get a snapshot every quarter or every 6 months or a year or something to actually see something change. But again, a lot of these people that are 30 to 40 years old, okay, they grew up probably with the NES, with the Super NES, with the N64, and with the GameCube. And so they're just rolling on through with Nintendo, and they're the fans. It's not the kids. Kids don't talk about Nintendo stuff. They didn't grow up with it. They didn't grow up with the handhelds either. The handhelds aren't even supported, really, which sucks. The last one that we had, as far as I know, is the 3DS. And yeah, that's been almost a decade since one of those came out. Again, what they're playing on for their handheld is their phone or a tablet. And so they grew up playing something else. And then the games that they fell in love with as kids, well, they're not on the Switch. They're not on Nintendo. So Nintendo does have a problem with an aging demographic of their player base, because eventually 20-year-olds are going to become 30s, 30s are going to become 40s, 40s are going to become 50s, and 50s are going to be dead. So that really starts kind of becoming a problem. And if they can't get the new blood in, they don't have a player base after a while. It will still take decades to roll through, but again, as it does, there's going to be less and less people buying their consoles, buying their games, buying their accessories, paying for the services. And again, as PlayStation and Xbox become more competitive against each other, so to speak, or trying to compete against Steam or whatever, Nintendo, I really think, is going to find itself just kind of out on its own. And it already has been, and maybe that's partly why we're seeing this. Is because, again, they're not getting the younger players in. They're not excited about it. They don't really care. They care about what's coming out on PlayStation, what's out on Steam and what it provides in value, or what's coming out on Xbox or being part of Game Pass. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're engaging with. Or just their free games. The free to play has really captured a lot of the younger audience too. So yeah, this is just really interesting to see, but it does show that Nintendo has a long-term problem. Because the old is going to die off, or start families, or get more career focused, or whatever. Again, their biggest spike is like college age. But yeah, there's not as many kids there as we think. Again, there's more 42, 43-year-olds playing than there are for any year of the minors, which is, again, that's surprising. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because yeah, that is pretty freaking bonkers. And then yeah, their user network base has grown a little bit, but it's definitely stagnating. It's not really going up that much anymore. And then also too, they're not really having any major growth in their actual Nintendo Online services. So I think this is why they're paywalling their backwards compatibility list, why they're paywalling game chat and some of these other features. Again, it's to get people to just pay for online because that's how they are wanting to get more money. Because if your consumer base isn't growing, like it's been said generally just for consoles, okay, PC gaming, they're doing fine. They added 34 million just last year in 2024. They're growing, okay, and it's steady. But like console gaming, it's not growing. And Nintendo's going to have a problem, and so is PlayStation. Now, Xbox has already given up. We all know that. They're all third party. They're putting their games everywhere, and they're making a ton of money doing it. We actually get to see that with their earnings reports and all of that. But like, when your primary focus to get people to your platform has been exclusives, player bases are just saying, nah. Like, isn't that amazing? That's ultimately what's happening here. Because again, the younger generations don't care. The older generations are just getting older, and there's no one else left at the end of the day to actually play on your system. That's really surprising. We take a look even at the top games that are played on PlayStation. Again, it's live service free-to-play games. Top games basically played on Xbox, same thing. Top games played on Steam, same thing. Top games played on Nintendo, we don't know. We know what sells, but we also know that 14% didn't even turn on their Switch 1 last year. Like, that's not good. So yeah, some of this data is pretty striking with what's actually happening. And so this is why I ultimately think they're changing their business model. Now we'll get into that in just a second, but yeah, let's get over their financials. I told you guys this was going to be long. And again, if you're interested in this type of stuff, be sure to go ahead and click on PlayStation. There's actually two of those. There's a main one, and then there's an updated one. And then, or like a part 2 if you want to see it like that. And then there's also one for Xbox. But let's actually go in for their financials at this point. So yeah, their market capitalization is huge as a company, $102 billion basically. And yeah, again, which is insane. And their enterprise value, okay, this is basically their stocks ultimately. The majority of any publicly traded company on the stock market is everything in their shares. And so they have, over 1 billion shares out there. It's basically 1.1 billion shares. There's a lot that are free floating, but there's also actually a lot that are held by people too, which is about 18.5%. So that's actually pretty high. Probably, the CEOs and companies and, big dogs, whatever. But yeah, again, their enterprise value is pretty big. So basically you take 1.1 times, what are they at now? $84. Ooh, they're going down today. And they're kind of like having a hard time. They're kind of having a hard time actually getting up there. So something's going on. And we do have their next earnings call actually really soon. But yeah, just 1.4 billion in the last 3 months. Like, come on, man. Yeah, they're doing fine. They're not hurting at all. Yeah, what is that? Let's see, I got a calculator on my phone here. So yeah, 1.16 billion shares times, what is it right now? $84. Yeah, we're looking at 97 billion. Dang. That is a ton of money. And yeah, there we are. It's actually updated really in real time. That's pretty hilarious. So yeah, that's roughly $97 billion. And again, that's roughly about what their enterprise value is. So again, when you take their debt and some other stuff and you put it against that, yeah, that's what you're getting. So, but yeah, this is pretty interesting actually. What's going on is, again, it's just a bunch of their stock. It's the same with PlayStation. It's the same with Xbox, Microsoft, Sony, Take-Two, EA, Ubisoft. It's all the same. It's all designed that way. So when a company is, quote, rich, okay, they're rich in stocks. They're not rich in cash. It's not like they can, fluidly move a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of laws, too, as well, on what you can sell, how you can sell it. It basically has to be like on a type of schedule, which is kind of a mess. But let's go ahead and dig into their statement here. So, yeah, they've been doing pretty good. Blue line, generally speaking, is higher than everything else, which is great. That's what you want. So, blue line is total revenue. This one was really good, Q3 of 23. That was $4 billion. That was massive. But let's take a look at, let's see, will it let me? Let's take a look at annual here. So again, it's been pretty much the same profile, relatively speaking. Really big blue line and small for everything else. So this is gross profit, operating income, pre-tax income, and net income. The yellow and the blue line are the most important ones, in my opinion. And so, yeah, it's 2018. Again, nice big blue line. We also get to see 2019, again, pretty big blue line. 2020, haha, COVID, right, really made them go up. I mean, they made $16 billion basically in 2020. That was pretty freaking insane. And then ever since then, it's been actually trending down. And this is what we're seeing too with a lot of gaming companies is that, again, people are not seeing the growth. They're going back to work. The stimmy money is all gone. So it's time to have a real economy now with inflation on top of it. And now tariffs also on top of that. And people just aren't spending like they used to. Again, total revenue was $11 billion in 2023. I mean, they haven't beaten the last 4 years in revenue. It's just been steadily declining, and that is not good. That is not what you want to see. And I want to say in 2022, we heard from some of the big dogs at Nintendo saying, oh, well, we're seeing kind of a lessening or a softening in our Nintendo, and so we need to make another console. So they didn't make another console because necessarily they wanted to. They're just seeing the trend of what's happening and being like, hey, we need to make another console to get hype back, to get some FOMO back, to show some extra features they haven't had yet for our console. Maybe let's compete with some of the other third-party to kind of be competitive and be able to play also some of those third-party games over here that are popular. And maybe we can actually get some more revenue from through the door, because this is actually what's happening. Now, they're not in danger of going broke. Okay, they're doing wonderful on that. Let's take a look at, let's see. I don't think it's in here. Their taxes are definitely pretty high, generally speaking, but they've also been earning less in taxes because they've also been making less money. So that's not necessarily good. But like pre-tax income, this is before taxes, lower, 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 a lot lower. That's not good. Like, we don't want to be seeing that. So again, this is why they're putting out this Switch 2, is because they basically need it as a company. Okay. Operating income, same thing. Lower, 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 lower. And again, this is a year-by-year basis. So this is from 2020 all the way over. And we continue to see this in everything. Total revenue, gross profit, operating income, pre-tax income, all of that stuff. And even their taxes. Yay! Taxes are going down. No, you don't want to see taxes going down because your revenue's going down. That's not good. You want to see taxes going down because you're being smart, not because people aren't buying your stuff. That's not good. Let's take a look at statistics. So yeah, return on assets, it's also going down. So they're not having as much of a, profit off of what they have. And again, that is steadily decreased. Return on equity, same problem. Gross margin, while it is high, 2020 was 63%. That means for every $100 they were putting in, they were getting 163 back. Yo, bro. That's correct. Oh, no, I'm doing that wrong. I'm sorry. So yeah, for every 100 they were putting in, they were getting that plus $63 in profit. But that's also been steadily declining too. Operating margin has actually been going up because, again, they're selling more software than anything else. And net margin, that one was actually really bad. What year was that? Oh, that was a quarter. Excuse me. Let's go to annual. That's really what I want. Sorry about that. I'll make mistakes. Welcome to the channel. Here we go. So yeah, their profit margin has still been pretty good. It's still been pretty high. But again, some of their other margins have actually been going down. So operating margin has been going down. Gross margin has actually been trending up the last couple of years. So that's good. Return on investment. And, 12%. 12% return on capital. That's actually some of the lowest they've had since like 2018. Or no, that's even further back than that, 2017. Yeah, that's some of the lowest in the company. So yeah, they are starting to lose money. And that's not good. And all of this is trending down too. It's kind of starting to come back up, but again, it's kind of slowly stagnating. Dividends are also down because, again, they don't want to pay as much. When we take a look at earnings, let's switch to annual again. They are beating their revenue, right? They are beating what they're projecting. But again, it's still trending down. And that's really going to suck. Now, for 2025, this is when the Switch 2 is going to kick off. So they're expecting a pretty good boost in growth. From here to here, that's going to be pretty big. And then they're continuing to expect that growth between 25 and 26. And then they're going to expect it to slow down in 27. What's happening in 27, folks? We're getting those new consoles, I think. So yeah, 27, 28, I think, is when we're getting those new consoles. And then we also take a look at revenue. It's projected to be the same thing. Now, let's switch that to annual again. So yeah, basically pretty much the same. But whatever they're projecting, that's actually what they're making. They're not like going above and beyond and making a ton of revenue, right? It's basically where they think they're going to be. But you normally want to be a little bit above that. And let's take a look at their revenue. Of course, most of it is from Nintendo, their gaming platform, as you can see. 17 used to be more toward other stuff, and they've slowly just sifted stuff out, and it's just their console now. So if their console starts to deteriorate, starts to go down, it really, really, really hurts them as a company. So we were talking about that with PlayStation, because again, roughly a third of their business is all PlayStation. And so, yeah, Sony needs PlayStation to succeed, but Nintendo, man, it's like 90% of their business is their game console. So when their game console suffers, it really suffers the rest of the company. And that really becomes painful. And we take a look at stuff here. Again, their revenue for Nintendo, it's been deteriorating since 2020. Again, this was kind of normal. That wasn't stimmy money, more stimmy money, but also inflation. People were buying cars, buying houses, also building a lot of stuff on their property like fences and patios and stuff, redoing the siding on their house, new windows, etc. Okay. And then vacations, and just look at this. Like, this is a massive decrease. You're talking about 3 years later, and you've lost 33% of your revenue from your main platform, which is 90% of your company. That's a lot. Like, that is pretty alarming, and everyone is like, oh yeah, Nintendo's great, Nintendo's doing good. And they are, Okay, let's not kid ourselves. They are doing well. Let me see if I can find this. No. Oh, yeah, it's in here. So, total debt. So, their total debt has been pretty low, generally speaking. Let's go to annual again. So, yeah, their total debt is really low, and it has been high in the past. But again, 52 million compared to the billions they make, it's literally nothing. So they're not in trouble of like going out of business or anything. They're literally one of the healthiest companies across the board I've ever seen. Again, their profit margins are insane. The amount of debt that they have compared to the revenue they're pulling in, it'd be like having a penny compared to making thousands. It's just ridiculous because, again, they make billions and billions and billions of dollars just every quarter. Well, like 1.5, $2 billion per quarter. So, yeah, they're making plenty of money. And this is how much they're accruing annually, right? Yeah, annually. That's pretty insane. So, like, they're doing a good job, okay? Their business is healthy. But Nintendo is not that popular like it used to be. The good years of the Switch 1, they're over. And they already figured that out years ago. And so they're like, well, we need to make something else. We need to get some more FOMO in here so that people can actually buy stuff. And now they're actually charging you quite a bit more on top of that. And ultimately, what I think is going to happen here is with the change in their business model, trying to cater to the individual or to the couple with no kids, I think ultimately what's going to happen is that people are going to choose the other console. I think people are going to choose and continue to invest in the PlayStation 6, in the next Xbox, or switch over to Steam. And I think Nintendo is ultimately going to be left behind. I really think Nintendo right now, I think they're going to sell roughly about 100 million consoles, which is about 33% less than what the Switch 1 sold. So I think they're going to take a pretty big drop. I think it's going to be kind of another Wii U moment. Not that it's going to sell horribly. I still think it'll sell pretty well. But again, we're going to have a third drop in sales that's going to vastly affect revenue. That's also vastly going to affect how many copies of games that they sell, how many Joy-Cons they sell, other accessories, how many subscriptions they have, how many people they have being a part of their network. And again, I don't believe that Nintendo has ever really been a primary console for anybody. I think it's either been Steam, it's been PlayStation, or it's been even Xbox. Because usually, all of those players on one of those platforms also usually have a Switch. But again, it's just for the first-party stuff. And they're not really putting out a bunch of first-party stuff right now. They have some, but it's definitely vastly more focused toward third-party. Just a list scrolling by of all of the games that are coming basically at launch. I mean, there's like 15 of them. Maybe even a little more than that. And we're only having one first-party Nintendo game at launch, which is Mario Kart. Really? You're just giving us one game? That's kind of insane. And then also with the tariffs on top of it, okay, the Switch 2, while they do have the money, they have plenty. They have, billions they can have and deal with it for stuff and absorb some of the tariffs for a while. But right now, like if they got stuff in after the 90-day pause and there isn't a trade deal worked out by then, they're going to be paying $670 and trying to sell it for you to you for $450, and that's not going to work. They're going to spend an extra $220 to get the console into the United States, and the biggest buyer, let's look at it again. The biggest buyer is the United States. Every year. This is why the tariffs matter. The biggest buyer of PlayStations is freaking USA. The biggest buyer of Xboxes are USA. The biggest amount of PC gamers One of the biggest countries, again, is the United States. We're the gaming player base. Not that I particularly like that, but we are where it's at for gaming. At least for the big premium type of stuff. We got the big TVs, we got the fancy whatever. And people that can't necessarily afford all of that stuff, they're sticking with the older consoles. Or they're playing on mobile, or they're handheld, or whatever they're doing. And it's just they have smaller economies. They have less disposable income with what's happening. We just found out yesterday that maybe India and Pakistan are at war right now. You think any of them are really worried about gaming? You think they're going to be buying the next Switch 2? They're going to be worried about war, man, especially the closer you are to the front line, to the border. That's a problem because, yeah, last we saw, Pakistan's actually mobilizing some. And, yeah, that's not good. So, folks, Nintendo does have a problem because they're seeing the drop-off, and if Americans don't focus on buying their Nintendo Switch 2, which I think a lot of them are initially, but again, if it is not perpetuated forward into the future, they're not going to get their revenue for their console. And they're going to have less influence over the market than they did already. And I feel like this is actually a pretty big bet for them because, again, just to get it into the United States cost them $220 more than what they initially want to sell it for. And again, I don't like tariffs either. I'm not a fan of them. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. And there's nothing we can do to change that right now. We don't have any influence. But more players, more gamers, they are going to pull back. And they're going to decide, and some people out there, they've always bought 2 consoles, or they've always bought all of the consoles, or they have every platform. But someone, as things become more expensive for food, for furniture, for gaming just in general, if we just take a look at that, there's going to be some people that are going to have to choose what they want to play on. And I don't think it's going to be the Switch. And that's a big long-term problem for Nintendo. Let me actually go through my conclusion here. Probably some of this we've already talked about. But yeah, ultimately what I see with Nintendo is that they're shifting between, they're changing and shifting their business model. Again, they're focusing on different stuff to sell their platform. It's not their games. It's the ray tracing, it's the 4K, it's all of that other stuff. The fact that your Joy-Con can be a mouse, that they have game chat now. They have spent more time on that stuff than actually selling games. And it almost kind of feels like a Wii U moment again. The Switch 2 is going to have 4K at 60 frames docked, 120 p at 180p at 120 frames per second for handheld, and that's a really big jump from what they had previously. The lineup is also really heavy third party, which is kind of nuts. And there's only one true actually Switch 2 exclusive title at launch, and that's Mario Kart World. Excuse me. Nintendo's out of game chat and a camera, but again, that's paywalled behind Nintendo Online. Thanks. Backwards compatibility is being expanded also with adding GameCube with 3 titles initially. They will add more, but again, that's paywalled behind Nintendo Online Expansion Pass. Also, the wireless controller for the GameCube. Let's take a look at that. It's here somewhere. It's probably further down. Yeah. This is wireless, which is nice, but it only works with the Switch 2. There's no way to use it with anything else. And you can't use it with original GameCube games. You have to buy the GameCube games they make available for you through Expansion Pass. Like, seriously? Who the frick is going to pay for this? And then you can't even find this in the stores right now. The only place you can buy this is actually through Nintendo. Because I think they're trying to stop scalpers and that kind of thing. But then, too, you're just limiting what you can sell to who you can sell to. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people are really going to buy that. Let's get you guys something to watch again. I think you like moving things on the screen. I don't blame you. Let's watch the launch title until you guys get sick of it. I already am, personally. It's the only game that's coming. Also, the accessories and the Joy-Cons, they're all expensive. $95 for a pair of Joy-Cons. Ouch. And they're still going to have stick drift. Man, that's going to be expensive. The console itself also has an upscaler built in with DLSS with NVIDIA parts. And of course, they're trying to probably pay that off to NVIDIA, or NVIDIA is getting a big, heavy royalty with that. And it's basically to help run the games. Again, I don't think it's helping to run the first-party games necessarily. I think it's trying to run all of the third-party stuff. Because again, we're going to get Elden Ring, we're going to get Cyberpunk, Borderlands 4. Like, these are going to be some heavy, demanding games for the Switch to actually run. And yeah, they're going to need an upscaler to actually do that. They've also added ray tracing for graphical fidelity. I'm sure you can see it here. Keep looking. Keep looking. I can't freaking tell. Can you? I can tell on Cyberpunk, or I can tell on some other games, you know, and like GTA 6 is going to be another one we're going to be able to tell with ray tracing. Also some racing games like Forza Horizon 5. But come on, guys. It's ray tracing. It's worth the extra cost. Again, this is not for first party. This is all for third party. They want that revenue. The tutorial that they have to help you learn about the Switch 2 is $10 to discover more about the console. Why? You already set the precedent, whether you wanted to do it or not. That Wii Sports was free, going to be tied in, and it was actually the best-selling game, quote-unquote, game ever. And you had mini games to practice and play stuff, and it was fun. And now you're not doing that. That's great. Nintendo has also canceled their rewards program, the coin rewards program. I'm not even kidding. Look it up. They ended this in March. And so whatever coins you do have, you have 12 months to spend it. So by the end of February next year, they're basically going to disappear. The graphical upgrades are nice, but no one was really asking for it. And so now we have a console that's $450, heavily used with the upscaler, I'm sure, to actually get that type of fidelity and all of that stuff up there. So it's not true. Like, the hardware is not good enough to actually run it at 4K, which, again, I think is frustrating. And then on top of that, the price is likely to go up to, like, $550, $600, I mean, whatever they need it to be to make some kind of a profit, or at least not go on the hole too much if the tariffs stick around. Which, again, this is pretty frustrating, too. They've also added a cost to everything except for Nintendo Online. So the games are going to be $70 or $80, $90 for physical. They're also adding basically $80 editions or copies for like Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom for Switch 2 editions. Even their Switch 2 editions are crazy expensive. And even if you just want to buy the updated graphics versions, again, you're looking at 15. Yeah, well, the Legend of Zeldas are 10, I think. But then we have some other ones like Kirby Forgotten Lands is going to be a $20 upgrade for ray tracing in 4K. Like, I don't think it's worth paying any amount of money, really, for graphical upgrades. Okay, if it's a full-blown remaster or remake, which is probably how they're terming it, then yeah, I can see that. But again, I'm kind of tired of paying extra money for 4K and ray tracing when, again, we've had that for like a decade now. Can we just stop? I mean, seriously. Can we quit pretending like this is a big deal? It's 4K. 4K has been around forever. Ray tracing has been around forever. And still the best place to play is PC. The ports aren't very good until they get worked out. But yeah, this is getting ridiculous. Excuse me. So yeah, ultimately, regardless of what you're looking at, everything costs 10 to 50% more than from the Switch 1 generation. And that is a massive increase for everyone to have to pay. And this shift, too, is more toward single player and couple gamers and isn't toward the family or the casual player. Again, looking at their lineup of games, not all of those are as casual. There's also a lot of IPs that are missing that are supposed to be coming out this year that have come out for previous consoles, like Animal Crossing. Like, we don't have one. That's just kind of insane. And they've also shifted away from things being more affordable. Because, again, the price increases that they've had for Joy-Cons being $90, for the console being $450, that was before tariffs. And now tariffs are going to make it go more on top of that in the future, I'm sure. And so why, honestly, the shift? Why try to compete with other handhelds? Why try to compete with other consoles for third-party games for them to be played on the Switch 2 rather than somewhere else? And still, it's going to be better to play those games on some other platform, any other platform, in my opinion, basically, than what Switch 2 offers. And again, they're plenty profitable, and they didn't have to switch. They didn't have to change their business model, I don't feel like. Again, their age group of who's buying their stuff is aging. They're not really bringing in the new players, so they need to find a way to bring in the new players. Besides just saying, oh, Fortnite. Fortnite is deteriorating too. They've lost half of their player base. There's still tens of millions that actually play. But again, to still lose half is a big deal. But again, it's like they need something specific that is like everything else in that space for kids that can draw them, because it's not Mario Kart anymore. It's not Super Smash Bros. They're playing Apex, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Minecraft, they're playing Roblox. They need to make a new game, something like Rocket League or something else that is unique just to them to try to pull players. And again, they haven't been doing that. They have stuck with the same business model with 30 and 40-year-olds buying their stuff. And that eventually isn't going to work anymore. And again, I'm sure the 30 and 40-year-olds, they're going to be buying their Nintendo, but I'm not. I'm 35. I see what they're doing. I don't like where they're going. I wanted to buy a Switch, actually, for my kids, but again, the price isn't going to stay there. The games are going to cost, the good ones, the games are going to cost $70, $80, $90, depending. The Joy-Cons are going to be super expensive, so I know my kids are going to wear through those pretty quick. And then I can't get the parts to actually fix them myself, like I can with PlayStation or Xbox. Or I can't just go buy a new mouse and keyboard for cheap for my PC, if I had one. So yeah, things look good now for Nintendo. And they have plenty of money and almost no debt whatsoever, and their profit margins are freaking insane. But I think in the next decade, we're going to see that Nintendo is going to become less relevant. That I don't think people, unless they do something really amazing, I don't think Nintendo's next console, the Switch 3, let's say, or, I don't know. I don't know what they would call it. But yeah, I think Nintendo is slowly becoming irrelevant. Because even with their ray tracing, even with stuff, it's cool. But like, instead of this, again, they're catering toward an audience that doesn't buy their stuff. That's not interested. Again, this is like 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds buying their stuff. So yeah, I think Nintendo has a really big problem. For the rest of this decade, they'll be fine. They'll probably okay next decade too, but again, they're going to become irrelevant as everyone else goes third party. PlayStation's already done it. Basically, they're putting a lot of their games already day and date or within a year on PC. If Xbox is able to link to Steam libraries and allow you to play it or access those games, Xbox players are going to be able to play PlayStation stuff pretty easy. PlayStation has gone completely third party. Pretty much we just have Starfield at this point, and we have Halo that hasn't gone over to PlayStation. But again, we're pretty much there. People have gotten over it, I hope. So Nintendo is really the last true exclusive left. But again, they're catering to the wrong audience, and I don't think their future is growth. I think it's the other way. So what do you guys think? Again, it's cool for what stuff is, but I definitely think that they're going to become irrelevant in the future. And they either have to completely re-innovate and change things, which is why I think they're partly changing their business model, but I think it's a little too late for that type of a change. They have to do something else. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. God, I just want to make it through my intro. Sorry for the coughing, folks. You can always follow me at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. If you like the content, please share it. Please share it with folks. I know y'all know people. Y'all say you're lonely and stuff, but come on. You know some folks out there, so I appreciate you guys sharing. Also, like, sub, all that jazz. If I've earned a sub, go ahead and let me have it. If not, maybe I can earn your sub on the next one. I'm always trying to do that. You can also follow me over at Twitch as well at Don't Tread on Thee. When I'm doing things like this, I'm not interacting with the chat because otherwise it screws with my mind and I can't keep track of what I'm talking about. I got to write it all down anyway. As you can hear, I got it on these big, massive cards. Basically, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff on my YouTube channel as well. There's a ton of stuff through the playlist. There's a lot of those, actually. So go ahead and scroll on through and see what's out there. But yeah, I think Nintendo ultimately has a problem. And while I don't think they're going anywhere, again, I think the woohoo is already kind of starting to wear off. So, I mean, this was before, and then we got some information, and people are excited. But again, there's some issue there too, and they've been stagnant really for a long time. But like their earnings haven't been really that great. Their dividends are decreasing, and again, the hype is real, but hype doesn't sell you consoles. You actually have to provide something that's unique. And Nintendo just seems like they have hubris right now. Because it's like, you're selling all of that for that? No. I'm just going to move on to something else. My kids won't grow up with a Switch 2. We're going to play older stuff. I can fix those. And the parts are still available to purchase. And I can still play the games. And it's fun. But boy, with what Nintendo is doing, it's like it's a different direction than what I'm buying their console for. So probably from here on out, I'm out.